My call to everyone who's listening right now is to take that same attitude and to be one of the builders of the future of the liberty movement. And look, we need people to work in every area to advance liberty. We need academics. We need people in journalism. We need people in politics. But we also need people in business who care about liberty, who are representing capitalism through their actions to inspire people to support this, who are leveraging their positions as successful business leaders to talk about capitalism and liberty because people will listen to them.
Welcome to another episode of Voices of Liberty. I'm your host, Sean Themea, and today we are bringing to you a very exciting guest, someone with a great background in capitalism, entrepreneurship, and messaging the cause of liberty. He is the CEO and founder of Liberty Ventures Network, the former CEO of Conscious Capitalism, and the founder and former president of Students for Liberty. But before he got involved in talking to boardrooms and speaking at major events, it all started with that spark, that liberty light bulb moment that goes off for all of us. So we're going to hear from him today about where he's going, where he's been, and what he recommends you do if you want to get involved in the cause of liberty. Please welcome Alexander McCobin. Alexander, how you doing?
Doing great, Sean. Thank you so much for having me here. And thanks for starting this podcast. We need to get more positive messages and stories about how to advance liberty out to a larger audience. And so love what you're doing here.
Yeah, well, none of this happens without people like you. So thank you for everything you've done and for being here. Now, I love to hear everyone's first liberty light bulb moment, right? Their origin story, if you will. So tell us, where did it all start for you, your interest in the cause of liberty?
So I had an interest in liberty for a long time. It was kind of in my DNA from when I was a kid. But when I turned 14, I joined the debate team in high school, and I was starting to ask for all kinds of books to get ready for philosophical debates, like John Locke's Second Treatise, John Rawls' Theory of Justice, and others. And my dad said, you know what? If you're going to read these books, you also need to read this one, and gave me a copy of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged for my 14th birthday. It took me a month to read over that summer, but by the end, I was hooked. I thought to myself, this is what I've always believed put into words. And that was the start of my commitment to liberty in life. And as much as I look back and ask myself, is this the right philosophy? Are these the right principles going forward? I find myself recommitting to them every time. And it all really started with that copy of Atlas Shrugged.
Now, for those who aren't as familiar, how would you explain the point of Atlas Shrugged in maybe 15, 20 seconds?
Atlas Shrugged is a dystopian novel that explains what can happen to the world when liberty is sacrificed for authoritarianism, when reason is sacrificed to irrationality, and basically when humanity decides to give up on itself, which is really what happens when we give up on the idea of liberty.
You know, a little rationality surely never hurt anybody, right? We can all be a little rational sometimes, right, Alexander?
Everyone can be, absolutely. And it's not to say that emotions are a bad thing. Emotions can be actually very rational and a part of what it is to have a good life. But we also do want to have logic. We want people to be free, and we want people to make their own choices and have the freedom to be illogical when they choose to be.
No, completely agree. So your career and the organizations that you've championed and founded have really been at the intersection of not just liberty, but human potential and human flourishing and entrepreneurship, right? There's layers here. So was it Atlas Shrugged that first made you connect these three things, this liberty, entrepreneurship, and human flourishing? Or was it a later point in your life where that connection became evident?
It was certainly a later point in life, because actually after reading Atlas Shrugged and joining the debate team, I planned to live in the ivory tower for the rest of my life. I wanted to become a philosophy professor originally. I just thought the world of ideas was so amazing. That's all I wanted to engage with. But at the same time, I wanted to see those ideas transformed into practical changes in the world, to see them actually applied to society and to humanity. And that's what led me to starting my own organizations, to being entrepreneurial, starting Students for Liberty, and starting a few other businesses and nonprofits that I was using to try and make the world a better place. And at a certain point, I started to realize the limitations of just being a professor. It's great for those who are really successful in developing the ideas for liberty in academia. That's awesome. But I started to discover there were other ways to do that. And as I was building up Students for Liberty, I got connected with our mutual friend, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, who was a supporter and then became a mentor and a friend. And after he published his book, Conscious Capitalism, and started a nonprofit to share that philosophy with the world, basically encompassing the Whole Foods management philosophy, he asked me to go and run it for him. And it was my time there at Conscious Capitalism where at first what I thought I was doing was just spreading ideas, that I started to realize the importance of actually combining the realm of ideas / liberty with human flourishing and with entrepreneurship, building businesses, and how they can all work hand in hand with each other. And that led to starting the Liberty Ventures Network and what I'm committed to now, which is getting more people who care about liberty to go into business and to get more people who are in business to care about liberty.
That's awesome. And John Mackey's a tremendous guy, right? Founded many great companies. Who else came along on your path, right? Mentors, friends, family, that helped set you down the road to individual liberty and free markets and the man you are today?
So in terms of influencing me to support liberty, let's say to support liberty to begin with, I had some incredible teachers, both in high school that opened my eyes to different opportunities out there, debate coaches like someone named Aaron Duryea and others. In college, I had some amazing professors like Professor Alan Charles Kors, who actually started the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education back in the day. Now the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, that's doing amazing work, picking up where the ACLU has dropped the ball in defending civil liberties and free speech and things like that. But what the people who really helped me on my journey were those I met as we started Students for Liberty back in the day. The other students I was working with who gave support for getting it going, mentors who encouraged me to really pick this up, like Tom Palmer from the Cato Institute and the Atlas Network, David Bowes from Cato, and others. And I gotta say, Jeff Frazee, the founder and president over there at Young Americans for Liberty, was certainly one of the people who inspired me and encouraged me along as well. From the very beginning, when we were starting Students for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty at the same time, we pushed each other to do better and always wanted each other to succeed. And so always had a strong connection to and appreciation for Yal and Jeff as a result.
That's great. We champion rugged individualism a lot, and for good reason, in the liberty movement. But as the great leader of liberty, Hillary Clinton, once said, "It takes a village." And I think there's some truth in that. And for those who don't know me that well, that is sarcasm. Hillary Clinton is not a great leader for liberty. But that's great. Always good to give credit where credit is due. Now, you founded 2 companies, at least 2 we've talked about, and led at least 3. You've really stepped up in the movement, Alexander. But early on in your career, when you were first getting started or perhaps launching your first venture, were there people who tried to knock you off your path, or were there obstacles you faced, resistance that nearly set you back completely? How did you overcome challenges early on in your career?
So admittedly, I have started a few more organizations than that, both for-profit and nonprofit, some of which I did lead and some of which I just helped others get started. And that's a really important point to make, because we always talk about the organizations that people are the president or CEO of and think that's the most important thing to do. And it's a lot of work to run an organization. But as you said, we don't just do these on our own. And actually, to give you a better example than a Hillary Clinton quote, if we go back to Atlas Shrugged, if you think about the main character, John Galt, even he didn't act on his own. What John Galt did was start a movement and worked with other incredible business people to change the world. And that's what it takes for us to advance liberty or to start organizations, to work with other people. That is the definition of an organization. It's organizing people together around a common purpose to work with each other. And that is honestly one of the biggest challenges when starting any organization. It's finding the right people to work with to get going. And that has consistently been the biggest challenge actually for me when starting organizations. It's finding the people who have the dedication and commitment to actually getting this off the ground. They're not just raising their hands because it sounds nice. They're willing to put in the sacrifice that it takes to get it going. It also is about finding the people who have the right skills that they're able to actually help out, even if they're willing to make the sacrifice. But then thirdly, there are people who will align around a common vision. And this is a lot more challenging than it sounds to an outsider who's never started an organization before. But having a direction to go in that everyone is working towards in unison is one of the biggest challenges with starting something new. Because from the very beginning, when you're drafting your business plan or you're sitting around a coffee table discussing what you're going to do, everything is available. You can go in any direction, and you don't necessarily have data saying this is the right way or that's the right way, and that's going to be successful. And in fact, you're not going to know just sitting around a coffee table. You have to go out and do things and find out what works versus what doesn't and what you're going to be able to succeed in as a group. Then that takes trial and error. So the most important thing and the biggest challenge with starting any new business, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, is to get the right people on board. Get the people who are willing to put in the work and make the sacrifice. Get the people who have the right skills to make it happen. And get the people who can and will align around a single purpose and find the way to work with each other in bringing it to fruition instead of going in a dozen different directions.
This is tremendous stuff, Alexander. How did you transition from youth activism, working at Students for Liberty, into working for entrepreneurs and developing the next business leaders of tomorrow so seamlessly?
Well, I appreciate that it looked seamless from the outside. It certainly wasn't on the inside, especially because it wasn't just a group of entrepreneurs at Conscious Capitalism. It was actually a group of incredibly successful CEOs and investors and business leaders who had their entrepreneurial days behind them. They had been successful entrepreneurs. But when I joined Conscious Capitalism, it wasn't just John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, on the board when it was a public company. It was also people like Kip Tindall, the founder and CEO of The Container Store. And I recruited Ron Shake, the founder and CEO of Panera Bread at the time, onto the board. And the list goes on and on. And that presented a whole different set of challenges from what I was doing at Students for Liberty. Not just because they're in a very different phase of life, in being older, in having already accomplished so much, and in being primarily interested in their businesses and their other projects than just working together on conscious capitalism, versus when you're working with students, there's a lot of free time. Social organizations are really important. It's easy to make that the priority. But these were seasoned business leaders who were incredibly successful and who were used to being the big dog in the room who would set the tone for everything else that would happen. And so there's an old saying that trying to get a group together, especially in a boardroom, is like herding cats. This was more like herding tigers, because they were all used to eating anyone else around them and telling others what to do. So I had to learn a whole new skill set in working with them, going into conscious capitalism as a 29-year-old, figuring out how I would get 50, 60, 70-year-olds to align around my vision for what we were going to do and how we could grow this organization and network. And I walked into a situation where actually it was divided.
Makes a lot of sense. And yeah, to press the tigers, you've got to get it done. You've got to have a plan. What about psychologically, right? How did you get in the mental state to be able to say, hey, I'm not going to get frazzled. I'm going to take on this big challenge beyond, proving your worth and having the plan, right? How did you get that confidence and that mental mindset to succeed? What contributed to that?
So very explicitly, the thing that helped me out the most was getting help from other people. And some of that was getting my first executive coach. I think this is something that is a game changer for anyone who's beyond just getting an organization started, to figure out how to navigate political situations, to identify blind spots, and to start up-leveling your own skills. But it's also working with peers who are in similar positions, developing, whether it's a formal cohort, like the kinds of things we run at Liberty Ventures now, or an informal group of friends who are in similar positions, to just share challenges with each other, to talk about what you're doing and think through opportunities and give each other encouragement. Because when you're starting something or you're running an organization, it's very lonely. The pressure is incredibly high. And what I was in with Conscious Capitalism was a combination of those two and a whole new environment for me. But having friends who were running their own organizations, having an executive coach was so helpful for me to not just recite a mantra to myself and not just to figure things out on my own, but to draw upon the lessons, inspiration, and support from others to get through it. And that really is I think, one of the most important recommendations I can make that may seem surprising to other libertarians or people who care about liberty. Again, think you do it all on your own. That's not the case. We believe in voluntary associations. So find the other people that you want to voluntarily associate with who are going to be able to help level you up, even and especially in those tough situations.
That's great advice. And on the note of voluntary association, these groups that you founded and led, they're all very mission driven. And in theory, everyone who joins the inner circle, it would be aligned, which makes them successful. But have you ever ran into a situation where, say, an investor or a power player has tried to knock the organization off its path or stray from its principles, chase an opportunity that wasn't aligned with liberty? How did you deal with that?
So you're absolutely right, Sean, that we're really driven by purpose and mission and have a clear sense of what the mission is of the organizations we're a part of and what we want to do. But there are a lot of reasons people get involved in different organizations. Maybe they think the mission is nice, but they might just want to be around high impact or famous individuals and ride their coattails. Or they may want to come in there explicitly to take over the organization and change its mission as a part of their purpose. Or maybe they're looking to advance a personal interest that may not necessarily be in conflict with the organization's mission, but it's not what it's there to accomplish. And it's really important to figure that out as soon as you can, what's really driving another individual. Because if it's not in conflict with the organization's mission, you can actually work with that. Just because they're motivated by something different than you are doesn't mean you can't find a way to work together. There still might be a win-win-win opportunity here. But you also need to know that so that you can draw lines in the sand and not diverge the organization from its mission and not sacrifice it. Because you're right. There have been times over my career where I've had donors offer big checks for us to change the mission of an organization, for us to explicitly embrace a certain position or reject another. And I had to say no, because that would have fundamentally changed what the organization was all about. And in addition to just being the wrong thing to do from a moral or philosophical standpoint, it also practically would have been a bad thing. It may have been beneficial in the short term in getting some more money in the door, but it would have threatened long-term growth and the opportunity to get funding from other places. I've also been in positions before where I've had really important individuals pressure me to sacrifice the interests of the organization to benefit them. And I don't want to get into any specifics with that, but it required not just taking a moral stance to say, this is not actually what the organization is here for, and it's unethical for us to sacrifice what the organization should do for your personal interests. But it also required a lot of political maneuvering to be able to do that in a way that didn't lead to more conflict or to greater tensions or to an even worse result for the organization. But the most important thing is to really understand for anyone who's listening, both what your personal mission in life is and what your values and principles are that provide your guardrails. And when you're working within an organization, even one that you founded, understand what that purpose is, what the principles for that organization are, and where they're aligned and where they're divergent. So you're able to establish those boundaries and work with other people within the framing of what's correct for the organization and what's correct for you.
That's great insight, and appreciate you standing tall and true to your principles, like I expect you to, of course. Now, I'm sure that, scratch that, reverse it. Now, with Students for Liberty in particular, you were invested not just in global liberty activism, but also in changing hearts and minds and opening people up to consider and embrace the ideas of liberty. So can you think of a time in your leadership with Students for Liberty, or really any of the organizations you've been with, where you've seen someone change their heart and mind toward liberty because of your work?
Honestly, there have been more than I'm able to recount, but I do remember actually one individual in Students for Liberty who came to a student group event that was incredibly skeptical, actually was coming from a far left socialist position, and started arguing with our students. And they received a copy of one of our books, The Morality of Capitalism, that we had published, and actually went through and read it in their spare time in the dorm room, and then came out to one of our conferences and actually introduced themselves to me and said that they were still exploring this, they weren't sure what they believed quite yet, but eventually went on to become one of our campus coordinators and executive board members. And what really did it for them was an honest conversation about what the principles of liberty were and what its impact is in the world. It wasn't a heated argument. I've come to realize that debating someone where you really get into a fierce debate with them rarely ever changes their mind. It just forces them into a defensive position where they're going to become more solidified in their anti-liberty views. The best thing that we can do is plant seeds with them. Give them different arguments for liberty. Give them different ways of thinking about the world. And then give them the fertilizer, the soil, the water to help turn that seed into a full-fledged plant and a tree that bears fruit. Giving them other people who share these views, welcoming them into a community of support, giving them the opportunity to contribute to the ideas of liberty or to advance it where they agree with it. So the most important thing is to not go in and berate people or try and force this on them. I mean, that even is antithetical to our general belief in liberty. We believe in voluntarism, so they need to voluntarily come to this. But keep giving them the opportunity to discover liberty. Keep giving them the invitation to be a part of a community that supports this. And keep helping them on their personal journey to come to these ideas.
That's great. And it reminds me of a quote, right? Do you care more about being right, or do you care more about investing in somebody's scratch that, reverse it. That's great. And it reminds me of a quote, it's, do you care more about being right, or do you care more about changing the person's perspective and opening them up to a better way, right? Because if it's all about you and just arguing and the heated debate, right, they can tell it's more about you. If you show you're invested in the other person, right, that you care about them, you must really care about the ideas, not just about your ego. So it sounds like that's exactly what happened, and the ethos of how you led the organization. What about a time in Conscious Capitalism or Liberty Ventures in your work with entrepreneurs? What is an accomplishment in particular that you are very proud of in the entrepreneurial section that your organizations have created?
There are so many things I've been proud of at Liberty Ventures, even in our short existence of just over 2 years in supporting entrepreneurs. Some of it, admittedly, is just finding the incredible entrepreneurs out there and giving them the support that we can. Before this, we were chatting about one of the entrepreneurs that we've supported in our network, Blake Scholl, the founder of a company, Boom Supersonic. Blake is absolutely amazing. He was inspired by Ayn Rand like me, but went into originally computer science and developed a company that was sold to Groupon, and for a couple of years was just working on helping people get discounts to major outlets across the United States until he eventually said to himself, I am wasting my talents. I am not enjoying any of this, and just my life feels incomplete. And so he left Groupon, started exploring the things that he was really passionate about, which was aviation, went back to first principles with it and said, I think I can come up with a way to do supersonic travel cheaper, quieter, and better than anything that had been done before, and actually help the world move faster again. And started a company out of his basement. 13 years later, they've tested their first supersonic jet. They are ready to go commercial soon. And what I love about working with Blake is that he's just out there doing it. He is Howard Rourke. He is a Hank Rearden. He is just driving this forward. And I want to amplify his story and show the power of people who believe in liberty and who take the responsibility of making the world better on themselves, what they're able to accomplish. And I think actually most of the best entrepreneurs out there have that attitude. They are aligned with liberty and taking personal responsibility for making the world better. But for others that are just, and we just connected with Blake in the last couple of years. He's been far down his entrepreneurial journey already. So we're just doing what we can to support and amplify what he's doing. But there's another entrepreneur who's actually a senior in college right now at West Virginia University, Logan Kuvo, started a company called Best Damn Tape, a hockey tape company. And he came out to our principal business pitch competition this summer at Freedom Fest, made it to the final round, didn't make the top 3, unfortunately, but he came out because he was excited to have the chance to pitch to Steve Forbes, to Sean Nelson from Lovesac, and others, and has since gotten much more involved in the Liberty Ventures Network. And what we're doing again is just recognizing Logan's got this company that's actually doing really well. It's starting to do tens of thousands, on the track to hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in revenue, just selling hockey tape and then expanding into other sportswear categories. And what we're able to do is just figure out who are the people that Logan should be in touch with to help him out. Who are the advisors? Who are the potential investors? Who are the distributors and customers that we know? And this, I think, is one of the things that we've been missing for a long time in the movement, and what Liberty Ventures is all about. Bringing together values-aligned investors, executives, and entrepreneurs to build the ecosystem of people in business who understand the power of capitalism as a force for good, and get them to work with each other, help each other succeed, starting from the same principles, so that as they're more successful in business, they have the relationships to go and do other things in the world, in the liberty world as well, whether that's nonprofits, politics, or anything else. But it all starts with them succeeding in the world of business first and helping others who share these principles succeed in business first.
That's great. And yeah, I remember seeing Logan at Freedom Fest and was really impressed with his pitch. So bright future for that guy. No small part to the work that you're doing with him. Now, Alexander, where would you say some of the greatest threats to capitalism and entrepreneurship right now are coming from?
Unfortunately, the attacks on capitalism are coming from both the traditional left and the traditional right of the political spectrum at the moment. Actual free market capitalists are few and far in between today. And this demands that any of us who believe in liberty, and especially those who are in business and benefit from capitalism as a system, to be willing to stand up in a principled manner for it. We of course know the threats of socialism and communism, left-wing authoritarianism, but we also need to be concerned about state interventions in the economy that come from the right, from calls for a new version of mercantilism, basically, or a state-sponsored version of capitalism, which is not even really capitalism itself. And for both sides, there are temptations for business people to give in to them because you want to keep your head low. You don't want to be attacked by anyone who's in charge, or there might be opportunities to get subsidies or regulations that favor your business. Or you just honestly want to focus more on your business more than anything else and just stay out of the fray. I get it. But capitalism has been so critical to the flourishing of humanity over the last 250 years. And we are coming upon the 250th anniversary of the development of capitalism. 1776 not only brought us the Declaration of Independence, it also brought us Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And it is not a given that we will have capitalism for another 250 years. But the people who are in the best position to understand its importance and to advocate for it are capitalists themselves. And so this is a call to anyone in business or who's thinking about going into business, who's listening, to remain principled, to be the best representative of capitalism that you can be, to be the best advocate of capitalism that you can be, and to be the best collaborator with others who share those commitments with you in capitalism to preserve and advance this incredible system.
You hear a lot of young people today are struggling with cost of living, and they're hearing that the American dream is more and more out of reach, perhaps for their generation, more than any other prior. And if we live in a capitalist economy, how is that possible? How can capitalism be the answer to the state we're in today?
I think it's because we don't really live in the capitalist utopia that we want to be in. There's so much state intervention in the United States in the economy that we can't really describe it as capitalist. The areas where we've had the most free market activity is where we've seen the most opportunity, with prices dropping, salaries increasing, opportunities being available. The places where we've seen the most government intervention is where we've seen prices rising, with salaries not being available, with opportunities being diminished. It's a clarion call for us to be more free market, to get the government out of the way, and for people to better understand what really drives prosperity over the long term and not just seek short-term solutions.
In the next 10 years, the next decade or so, where do you see the liberty movement headed, and how can our listeners play a part, especially if they're just getting started in their involvement in the space?
I honestly don't know where we're going to be in 10 years, but there's a saying that I go back to quite a bit, that it's a lot easier to build the future than to predict it. And my call to everyone who's listening right now is to take that same attitude and to be one of the builders of the future of the liberty movement. And look, we need people to work in every area to advance liberty. We need academics. We need people in journalism. We need people in politics. But we also need people in business who care about liberty, who are representing capitalism through their actions to inspire people to support this, who are leveraging their positions as successful business leaders to talk about capitalism and liberty, because people will listen to them. You look at Elon's influence over X. Long before he bought it, he was one of the most prolific posters, and people listened to his advocacy for capitalism because of how successful he's been. But also, very explicitly, we need people who care about liberty to go into business, to make money, and donate to the rest of the movement to support these causes. So my call to everyone listening is to not just think that politics, academia, or policy work are the only ways to advance liberty. Go into business, be incredibly successful, and use that bully pulpit and use the money you make there to advance liberty as well. That is an option, and that's what the whole Liberty Ventures Network is here to support people in doing.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much, Alexander, for being here with us, for the dedication you have to liberty and capitalism and entrepreneurship, and keep up the great work. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sean. You as well.
Thanks for being with us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe to Voices of Liberty on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, or YouTube. And to learn more about how you can be a part of the movement advancing freedom in our lifetime, visit yaliberty.org. I'm Sean Themea, and thank you for listening to Voices of Liberty, where we keep the torch of liberty burning by telling the stories of those who carry it forward. See you next time.